I realize that I'm not the most attractive YouTube personality, but I want to try to give a talk on the subject of what I think needs to be coordinated in order to create an effective climate change activism community, not only of ethics, but of long lasting purpose. Most people who are familiar with the details of the climate crisis and keep up with the news know that what we face, and the role that uncertainty plays is to bypass and hotwire around immediate indignation that could lead to creative social crisis. Without awareness and without the necessary indignation regarding the lack of remorse by the industries responsible and the movements in politics responsible, we can't summon the creative tension necessary for effective social growth. Not everyone who is um, living a way of life that is antithetical to our potential to have sustainable development goals is in some boorish and belligerent way opposed to climate change activism. On the contrary, many people are just set in their ways and don't understand or see the alternative. So I'll go through a little bit of information about what sort of static exists in the history of media and information in education. We had a man back in the 70s who was around named Richard Buckminster Fuller. They called him Buckminster Fuller, or Bucky for short. He hypothesized that a high quality of life with a minimum drain on the overall ecological system, and albeit Frank Herbert's words, for his ecological demonstration project was possible for billions and billions of people. In fact, he went so far as to explicitly state that the Earth was determined to make us successful despite our overwhelming ignorance and fear. Well, what's ironic is that ignorance sometimes comes packaged as courage, not fear. People who are acrimonious to me feel that the personality conflict that exists between me because of my articles at the Pitt News and one-time President Ronald Reagan and his son and his pals in bands like King Crimson were somehow my doing. I don't like personality cults, especially the dictatorial type. I asked Mr. Reagan in a letter to explain his ecological policy. He gave me a list of priorities, and at the bottom it said, ecology. I favor clean environments so long as all Americans get a piece of the expanding pie. His first inaugural address railed and railed about America as a mighty machine. Toxic fumes, in other words, were his idea of social progress. He had defeated Jimmy Carter, who wanted a solar energy bank, a fact now long forgotten. So, what is it that can actually be done to bring into focus a reasonable and sensible goal of sustainable development? Sustainability is faced with a wrecking ball of climate change. We don't know when, if, or what time, and in what state the Earth will be in when we manage to get it stabilized, if we manage to get it stabilized. In order to do it, we need to act double quick. We need to get on the ball with great effort to bring about simplified common sense about the reckless endangerment we pose to our children's futures. There's a film based on an Indian word, Native American word, Kriyanasqatsi, which means life out of balance. COP27, which just took place on the continent of Africa and the nation of Egypt, came to an agreement to implement the promissory note of payment for loss and damage to countries who are suffering the worst effects of climate change but contributing the least to it. But this is a stopgap formula. If we don't bring about sustainable development in Africa, they can do right what we have done wrong, beginning with eco schools and ecological friendly development. There was no reason for all of those years of fossil fuel wars and belligerence, courage and ignorance, rather than ignorance and fear. What ultimately are we asking ourselves when we ask us to abandon ignorance and admit our fearfulness about doing well by the planet? Many Republican conservatives, when they talk about religion, say that they believe in intelligent design. It seems reasonable if the planet can reach a sustainable development goal worldwide that there is reason to debate and describe this as intelligent design. At the very minimum, it's intelligent response to what is available on the planet for all of us. We need to abandon ignorance and look very carefully at the way that we go about building our schools and including ecology and recycling. Eco schools, tutors who can teach people how to minimize what is called our carbon footprint so that we don't feel that because we are set in our ways, we have to accept toxic industries. But Mr. Fuller believed that our society should be paid to stay at home. Because of COVID, many corporations have redesigned their premises to allow at-home labor. Think of what would become of our society if people were allowed to be paid to stay at home, if recreational driving was discouraged. People could mingle in the communities, could plant gardens, could encourage wildlife, could learn from one another, could sponsor community meeting halls where tutors came. Activists could find one another, could seek out community meeting houses in which to teach new topics. And our government, responding to this budding awareness from below, might too encourage government expenditures for the purposes of job and teacher retraining. Already, even where you would think there would be the least enthusiasm for job training in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin put up such a stink for his fossil fuel buddies, Coal mining towns have said, we want job retrainings. We would prefer to go with the flow of progress and rescue our children. I'm not saying these things with the demand of a social activist. I once took on social activism. It led me to question the way that I was mistreated and to help work out the information conflict that existed in a time where fear and ignorance were held at bay by courage and ignorance. I studied the relationship between our media as the journalistic enterprise and the hidden power structure of Hollywood. As you can imagine, the work requirements in such a research assignment were overwhelming, and the field work involved was so trying that I'm severely injured from the tasks that I took on for myself. So I'm not interested in being bullied by other activists into running into the streets. True, occasionally I take my sign out and sit at the federal building or walk through the local city. What I am interested in is helping allow people to think a little bit more clearly about what we need and can draw on from the past to clear the air of ignorance entirely. Courage and fear can walk hand in hand. Courage and fear can be friends with one another. But ignorance is of no friend to any of us. We need to wise up. We really do. We need to wise up about what we're doing to the planet, to ourselves, to the future, to each other, and especially, God help us, to the little children who look up to us and think we're mature.